Let's talk some baseball. Let's start on a positive note. Let's start with the best of 2023. Whatever you feel as you have enjoyed the most from this season. Again, team, player, new rule, whatever it is. Mike, let's go to you first. What have you enjoyed the most about baseball in 2023?
Dude, I'm gonna die on the hill that the rule changes rock. All of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love pitch clock. Do I think that it's perfect? No. I think that the concept of it, you could argue, is the best thing baseball's added in about 50 or 60 years. Mm-hmm. I think that the shift ban is, if you're going to call it a ban, is definitely helpful. Do I think someone like Luis Arraez pushes 400 in June or July without it? No, but of course Luis Arraez is a freak who's probably hitting 380 this year with or without that. And the stolen base jump is something that's very exciting to people. I wonder if that becomes like, you know how football stats change when it's like 17 games on the schedule? I wonder if it's like, oh, this is the era where just like stolen base stats are just so inflated.
Right.
Like even like relative to even like the 70s or something like that. Yeah. I just think that the brand of baseball we have right now in Major League Baseball is the best it's been in a while, like big picture. And I'm excited to see what that looks like with even more positive tweaks.
You know, I think you nailed it. There's the modern era. There's all. I think we'll have whatever. Maybe they'll call it the new rule era, because I don't think this is the end of the rule changes. No, I see at AA they've got the pre-tacked baseball. At AAA they're challenging balls and strikes with just a tap on the helmet, and they're overruling within seconds. So the new rule era, and this is really just the beginning of it, in my opinion. And I agree with you on that. I think that has really helped. Bailey, best of the season so far for you?
I don't know if parity is the right word, but I think the competitive balance is just a lot better than it was, let's say, pre-2020. You know, we got to the trade deadline this year, and this is, I think, partially because the playoff has expanded, which is something that I was initially against. Like, you know, when it went from 8 to 10, I wasn't happy. When it went from 10 to 12, I wasn't happy. And I'm sure, you know, I'm sure the owners are gonna, you know, lobby to bring it to 14, just because that's more playoff games, more revenue. But right now where it's at, competitively, it's great because you get to the trade deadline and there's more buyers than there are sellers. And I think, you know, we were seeing like a real gap open up in the league between the haves and the have-nots. There weren't a lot of like middling teams, really. You were either great or you were terrible. And I think now you see like a good like spectrum, and you see these teams competing for wild card spots. They're not strong in every area, but they're strong in enough areas that they're interesting. And so that's the aspect of it that I really enjoy. Even the best of the best right now, the best team in the league, the Atlanta Braves, on paper, I don't know if they're better than like the 2019 Astros or the 2017 Dodgers were. Like, those teams were so good, but part of it is because the worst teams were so bad. And so I think that's kind of changed up a little bit. And you're just seeing like a good like variety in terms of the quality of the teams right now.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, you've got teams that, you know, come into the season, they're trying a little bit harder because they don't have to win as many games to get into the playoffs as they did a couple of seasons ago. And I think you're right. I think we will see more games, because even though that first round bye is nice for, you know, getting the number 1 and the number 2 seed and advancing and all that, it doesn't help you out financially if you're an owner and you're trying to get that gate, that first round, and get an extra round. I think that's probably coming down the road. What about a favorite player? Bailey, we'll start with you. Has there been a favorite player to watch? I mean, it's been exciting to watch Ellie De La Cruz come up. Ronald Acuna has been, from the start of the season, he sort of announced early on that this is my season. I'm going to dominate. Has there been a player that you have really enjoyed sort of keeping tabs on or watching?
I'm going to say Hassan Kim. Hassan Kim
really good.
Has been a great story this year. I think the progression we've seen, you know, his first year in the big leagues, you know, he was brought in because he had such a high defensive floor, and they loved how he ran the bases. But the question is, how do you adjust to MLB pitching from KBO pitching? Because even that's a decrease in quality compared to, say, a hitter coming over from NPB like Yoshida. And so, you know, his first year he didn't hit very well. His second year they called him the father that stepped up because he was in Fernando's place. But he was like a slightly above league average hitter. I think it ended up that way. This year, he's just awesome in every facet of the game, playing incredible defense, runs the bases great, hits great. And, the Padres have been weird in how they've been disappointing. They're like a big like run differential underperformers, and they have a terrible record in 1-run games, despite the fact Josh Hader's their closer and they can't win an extra inning game. So things haven't quite worked out for them. But you look at a season, the guy like Hassan Kim's having, and the way he's been embraced by the Padre faithful, he's definitely a player that stands out for me this year.
He's a guy that we started to see come around late last year and during the postseason. Those things sometimes carry over. It's important to watch these games, pay attention to these players right now, because you may see somebody starting to take some strides right now that, MJ Melendez for Kansas City had a terrible start to the season. It's been a little bit better. Maybe this is his carrying off point, and he'll have a breakout 2024. Mike, how about you? Player for the season.
I mean, is there any doubt here?
There you go. Right.
Randy Rosarena, for those of you who didn't see me, put my graphic tee on the screen that I wore to the recording. I don't care what the stat line looks like at all with him. I think that his level of showmanship, his level, like organically, I think that his ability to rise to the moment is unparalleled. I think that if you saw the World Baseball Classic and you saw like how he was, especially in the Japan game, if he could just convince himself that every game had the fate of the universe on the line, Randy Rosarena would be the greatest player who's ever lived.
Yeah.
And I love that he's still, all-star level this year. He's one of the best players on a pretty good team. He knows how to entertain people, and he knows how to do it in a way that mostly doesn't piss people off, which for baseball is very rare. And I'm proud of baseball for not being upset that Randy poses at every home run at third base. I think it's awesome. I think it's fun. I'm usually drawn to guys like that. And for someone to also have a pretty good year on a good team behind that, I think this is Randy's world. And when we get to October, we're going to be stuck firmly in his world.
I can't wait for playoff Randy. I also hope, and this will kind of lead us to our next, and we're going to go negative for a minute. We're not going to spend too long in negative land, but we will. I hope the Rays, despite whatever's going on with Wander Franco's future, Randy needs a contract. Randy needs to get locked in. Randy needs to be there for a long time, and maybe with some clouds around the future of Wander, the Rays, even though there's money that they're probably, look, you can get insurance on deals, but that's not going to cover like this kind of stuff. That covers injuries. I hope Randy gets paid. Speaking of, and we don't have to go down that road for worse stuff. We can stick to like on the field stuff, but unless you want to go down that road. What has been disappointing in 2023 to you? There's a lot to choose from here. Mike, I'll start with you because I think I might know where you're going to go, but I won't spoil it. Maybe you'll go in a different direction. Disappointing part of 2023. What's been most disappointing?
I think it's the lack of correlation between spending and winning for a lot of these teams. Like, you expect me to say the Mets. I think it's way bigger than the Mets. I think it's San Diego.
Yep.
I think it's the Yankees. I think it's like you could throw Toronto in there, considering they're only the third wild card team and they have a pretty high payroll these days.
Yep.
I think that I've always been of the opinion that spending is really good for baseball. I think that trying is something that every team should do. I disagree with you guys a little bit in that I think the floor is still really low these days in terms of parity, when Oakland and Kansas City are doing nothing but embarrassing their fan bases every single day.
Yeah.
And I think that the top end of that, if the alternative to, fix the problem is to spend and try and be good, and that is not working for a lot of the teams that are doing, maybe even throw the Angels in there, of these teams that are like really trying hard to make something happen. They're trying to put together big groups that are meant to win and they're not winning. I think that really disincentivizes trying, and you have a lot of teams, trying to half measure it a little bit because they think they can get away with it. So I don't like where this goes if like none of those teams make the playoffs.
I'll say this, the parity comment. There are really only two teams that are completely dead And not just dead for this year, but dead for next year too. It's Kansas City and Oakland. Colorado is going to convince themselves that their next year's Arizona. The Washington Nationals are going to convince themselves that their next year's Miami's. Pittsburgh's going to do this. Pittsburgh's going to say we're the Reds next year. So I think that the parity element is there really only feels like there's two teams that are dead. Detroit's going to convince themselves that they can make a run at the Central next year. Anybody can make a run at the Central in the American League next year. But you're right about the money thing, and it isn't just the teams; it's those that the shortstops that we saw this past offseason. Dansby Swanson is maybe going to be the only one that makes the postseason, right? Xander Bogaerts, not so much. We're seeing all the money that was doled out for those shortstops. Carlos Correa is probably going to make the playoffs, but he has not been worth the money. So, yeah, there's the ammunition for the owner that wants to say, I don't need to spend money. Look what happens when you do spend money.
Exactly. I think that.
Yeah, that's the worry. I'm with you on that one. I worry about that right along with you. We know we're going to hear that. We're going to hear that in the season, and we're going to hear that in a couple years when we get to CBA talks. Bailey, how about you?
I mean, the worst thing's the Oakland A's. That's just a dark cloud that's been hanging over this entire season. The Royals, to their credit, I mean, they have like interesting young players. They just haven't been able to develop them into a good team yet. What's happened to the Oakland A's is, I mean, it's just so negligent. I just hate it for the fans there. And, I don't necessarily feel like the move to Vegas that's impending is going to even work particularly well for them. There's a lot of hoops they got to jump through to make that happen. And I don't know if that's a place that's ready for MLB team. This is like a really proud organization with like a really rich history, and just for everyone involved, it's just a huge bummer. And I think we talk about like how great baseball is this year and how healthy the league feels, but when you have one franchise that's going through with what they're going through, it just everything feels kind of incomplete.
I agree. You have chance of sell the team. I mean, it is rather embarrassing. It was the what they called it is escaping me. The reverse
boycott,
right, where they pretty much sold out the Coliseum, and they were allowed, and it was impressive to see that many people come together and actually execute and pull that off, because sometimes you can hear about that, you can get flyers for that, but then nobody shows up. So good job by Oakland fans to make noise like that. Is there a player that has that sort of stands out to you as disappointing on this 2023 stage? Bailey, we'll start with you.
The Texas Rangers are awesome and fun, and Jacob deGrom's not a part of it. And look, I should have chosen like an underperformer and someone who's hurt, but like it's just so hard, because they went out, they splashed the cash on him. They have a great team this year, and yet he would have really completed it. And to their credit, they've gotten pitching help at the deadline. Not just Scherzer, but I mean Montgomery had a great start for them a couple days ago. So but yeah, it really stinks that the best pitcher on the planet can't stay healthy.
I agree. I mean, it doesn't have to be a performance thing. Yeah, the injury bug definitely constitutes as disappointing. It's not for the performance, but for the unfortunate nature of it. Mike, how about you?
Can I give you an outside the box one? I'm going to give you Miguel Cabrera, because
2 home runs this year. He had his second home run the other day, and he looks surprised.
That's not what I mean, and it's more than like this is it for Miguel Cabrera, and he's not going to leave on a high note. I think that Albert Pujols leaving the way he did is going to firmly entrench his legacy as like maybe the second best player of his generation, or the best, like depending on what your generation you're going to classify him as. I think that Miguel Cabrera, who probably had an argument when I was 12 or 13 to be the best baseball player I'd ever seen. And he's going to go out maybe having an OPS plus of like 70. And I think that's really sad. And the power's all gone, and it's on a bad team that can't really put anything together. And I think that that's going to confuse people when they look at how it ended for him, that it's almost going to put a bit of a weird, funky cloud over the Triple Crown and being one of the best right-handed hitters there's ever been.
I say this though, it reminds me of going back to the pre-steroid era when you saw when most of the times that's how you saw players go out. They kind of went out, they hobbled off into the sunset. They didn't ride off into the sunset. Albert Pujols rode off into the sunset. It was fantastic, and Miguel Cabrera is kind of following that older, way of it, where he's obviously not the same player he was, and this, in my mind, it makes me appreciate what he was for so long, because now this is where it's at. It's over. It is sad and it is disappointing.
Adam Wainwright too. Now that you bring up some of that stuff, I feel really bad that he's not gonna. He's trying to make pushes to some of the big, counting stats, and he might not get there this year. Which, if you walked in before the season, you would have bet the farm that he would have hit some of these metrics. But the year he's having, I feel really bad for how he's going out. I mean, maybe he runs it back next year, but that's still pretty sad to think about.
It'd be interesting to see what his Hall of Fame candidacy is when we get there. It would have mattered, but for him, Yachty, and Albert to all be on the ballot the same year, the first time, I kind of wonder if maybe he would have picked up a couple extra votes, because it's all subjective, right? The voting is subjective. They could have said, well, he was close enough, and it would be an amazing moment for the Hall to have all three of these guys go in together.